Once we hear truth happening from the ground, we're able to quickly make decisions much quicker rather than waiting for things to happen, waiting for people to manipulate information before it gets sent out towards the mainstream media or market reports or commodity reports. No, you're not waiting for that, because sometimes these reports are far from the truth.
If the content we bring you on the podcast has helped you with your business or your career and you're looking for a way to financially support the independent production of this podcast, you can do that for as little as a few dollars a month by backing us on Patreon or becoming a paid subscriber on our YouTube channel. Another way to support us and continue your learning is to purchase one of our on-demand workshops available on our website, mapitforward.coffee/workshops. Check the show notes for links, and as always, thanks for the support. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 2 of a 5-part series where we're talking about how do we reduce the carbon footprint of coffee. And joining me is Kelvin, who is based in Malaysia, the founder of Mono, Origine and Coffex coffee, and pretty much from the sounds of the last episode, the OG of specialty coffee in Malaysia. Kelvin, we're talking in this episode about what should we be focusing on to create longevity in coffee. And it seems like that is something, as you established Mono Origine, that was a big focus for you. I wanted to start this conversation before we continue on the trajectory of how you guys are focusing on the longevity of coffee at Mono. I want to ask you, what is the current trajectory in your mind of the sustainability of coffee? Not in your business, but I mean coffee as a commodity and as an industry.
I think after the impact seminar in Brazil with FAF, I came to a conclusion that based on studies in Brazil, that the climate is going to be causing unfarmable lands for coffee, because there's increased temperatures. There's also droughts going on throughout Brazil. And in more recent time, like even last year, the drought was so bad that the yields are reducing. And they have data to prove that farmable land is being reduced to a smaller and smaller area. So once the farmable land is reducing, which means the yield will eventually drop. And based on the trajectory, instead of the next 30 years, it's being accelerated to within the next 10 years. And this year, we came mightily close to not having coffee, because here we have drought, no water, not enough water for the coffee, coupled with high temperatures. The high temperature will cause the nucleus of the coffee to die. If that ever happens, we will not have coffee. And this year, we came mightily close to that. And we can foresee that in the next coming years, it will happen.
Kelvin, I don't think people understand, in a year where the conversation in the coffee industry has been taken up by the CVA, I don't think people have they're not taking seriously enough when we say things like that on the podcast. I think they think it's perhaps just us creating drama or dooming. Can you help people understand the reality of exactly what you just said?
Okay, so when we start buying coffee from farmers now, we're having our ears very glued to the things that's happening on the ground. We are not hearing things from the news. We are not hearing things from people that can spew out fake news to create a panic or to create market movement up and down. We are actually getting information directly from people on ground level. So we are, as truth goes, we are as close to the truth more than anything.
As it gets.
Yeah.
As it gets.
Yes, correct. So, and once we hear truth happening from the ground, we're able to quickly make decisions much quicker rather than waiting for things to happen for waiting for people to manipulate information before it gets sent out towards the mainstream media or market reports or commodity reports. No, we are not waiting for that, because sometimes these reports are far from the truth.
Right. And that's why we have this podcast, is so that we can have people across the entire supply chain tell us in real time. And it's why we don't record these series like weeks and months in advance, because we want to have it as close to the events that are happening in real time as possible. So this is an incredible resource. Thanks to guests like you coming on the podcast, and Felipe and Angel and everybody else that comes on this podcast, to help all of us understand in their own words exactly how they're building businesses, what they're experiencing at Origin, the reality of their situation, because those reports are typically written by consultants who are being paid to skew the information in one way or the other in order to make the price on the commercial market, on the sea market, represented in a specific way. That doesn't happen here.
Yes.
When you're hearing Kelvin come on and say this stuff, he doesn't benefit at all from you benefiting from this information. He doesn't lose anything from you benefiting from this information. That's how you know you can trust something. He doesn't have an agenda other than to share information with you.
Yeah, I do have an agenda.
That is where you should.
It's to protect my own business. Yeah, my agenda is to protect my own business and to help protect businesses in my industry. I'm sharing this information so that to protect people from my industry from getting false information.
I love it. So I appreciate you correcting me there. That is, I'll take that one.
Yeah,
I'll take that correction. Yeah. So if we have created a baseline understanding where the basis of your strategic approach to continuing with your business, it was based on information that you collected. You went to Origin, you found out the data for yourself, and you realized that you had to, 1, pivot your business, and 2, take a leadership role in helping other people understand the seriousness of the situation so that we can help coffee be here for not just the next 5 years or 10 years, but much longer than that, both as an industry and as an agricultural product. So you showed that was the basis for your strategic decision making. Now, then we have to figure out how we're going to create that. So what did you decide to focus on in order to create that longevity for your business and, I guess, your industry?
I guess humans are the main problem here, right? Because we industrialize, we urbanize, we cut down a lot of trees, and we need a lot more food, and we need a lot more packaging. You look at things around you in the supermarket, it's all packaging. Things are being transported around the world. So we are the main problems. We cause these problems, right? When we industrialize or when we consume, at the end of the day, we create a lot of waste. And all these wastes are also carbon. Consumption is carbon. So in Malaysia, I'm not talking around the world, I'm talking about less Malaysia. The average Malaysian, we produce about 8 tons of carbon per year. 8 tons of carbon per year per capita.
Wow.
Per household.
Wow.
That's equivalent to 320 trees to neutralize each person's carbon. So am I going to plant 320 trees per year? I don't think so. It's kind of difficult. But what can we do to reduce carbon? We can change our lifestyles a little bit. Individually, we need to contribute, because let's not talk about our business. Let's not talk about industry. Let's not talk about farming yet. We as individuals need to change our consumption pattern, right? We need to look into the 6 R's. There's consider things to reduce. If you can reduce your consumption, try to reduce it. If you can reuse something, try to reuse it. If we can repair something, please repair it instead of buying something that's completely new. We can repurpose things. We can reformat things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, look into recycling stuff. So consider the 5 first before we consider recycling. So individually, we need to practice that. And I've changed the lifestyle and I changed the mindset of people in my company or people around me to look into this. Once you are starting individually to reduce all these things, the 6 R's, ultimately our personal carbon will decrease. And if everyone's doing it, instead of 8 tons, you can bring down 7 tons, 6 tons, wouldn't better? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what you are seeing now in worldindata.org, you just see the global carbon emission is just going exponential. And with carbon increase, without increased consumption, we are also contributing to increasing the temperatures globally. In my lifetime, I think the temperature, as we know, in the last 30 years has gone up 1.5 degrees. But based on the current trajectory, the next 10 years is going to be another increase of 1.5 degrees. That is scary. That's why, without realizing, you just know that, hey, how come everywhere I'm going out, it's just getting warmer, getting hotter. The weathers are getting more extreme. The floods are getting crazier. Snowstorms, extreme heat. Everything is going extreme, erratic and extremes. Even in a farm last year when I went to Kenya in November, this was my second trip to Kenya, I'm beginning to see right in peak coffee harvesting season, the tree is flowering. That never happened before.
I remember hearing about that.
So which means the rainfall is getting erratic, right? So you're getting rainfall even throughout the harvesting season.
Nature is confused.
Yes.
Nature is confused.
To me, that's a clear sign that we are not following the traditional weather patterns anymore. It's just gone haywire.
Well, and if we connect the 2 dots of the things that you've been saying, it's that you have empirically seen these things for yourself. You have gone out there, you have seen these signs, and you have to go back and figure out how you connect this back to business.
Yes.
And a lot of the time, we're being sent strange signals when we pay attention on social media and we pay attention to the news and to podcasts. We're being sent signals of things like, if we talk about carbon, because you raised it a few minutes ago, we're being told that no longer, like, carbon's not a real thing. Carbon belongs in the atmosphere, or it's a buzzword. Don't listen to these things. And then other people will say, but you should pay attention to carbon. Carbon is the most important thing that we have to figure out how to put it back in the ground. That's what's the biggest problem with regards to agriculture. If we don't have carbon in the ground, it cannot hold on to water. And because of these 2 conflicting things, we end up with an industry that turns around and says, fuck it, I'd just rather listen to the CVA. I'd just rather go and take another course and just not worry about things that I don't understand, because I can't figure out who's telling me the truth. So I'm just going to go and do something that's easier to think about. How dangerous is that approach to you?
How dangerous is carbon? I mean, we all breathe air.
No, not carbon. Not carbon. How dangerous is the approach of apathy? If somebody turns around and says, I'm not going to think about this problem. I'm just going to go and pay attention to things that are not important. How can that be a problem if we're looking at the longevity of coffee?
So we need people to acknowledge first there is a problem. We need to have information out there, share information with people that, we have a problem. Because to many people, maybe to them, ignorance is bliss. But it's not bliss. We face a reality that if we don't address this problem, the problem will just getting worse and worse until reaching the next tipping point again. So where does humanity go? It will be the end of humanity but to some of them, you say, Kelvin, are you crazy? We don't seem like we're heading that direction, but we are. Not in my generation, but could be in very near future generations. In the next 2-3 generations.
But it may be in our generation.
I don't think it's
so Kelvin, it may be in our generation.
Yeah, but not so drastic yet. But because we are humans are very tolerant, because it's like a frog getting boiled. So the warmer the water,
Boiled.
it's still not going to jump out until it cooks itself and it dies. So we are that little frog.
But I can tell you, as somebody who lives in a country where right now the average temperature oscillates somewhere around 45 to 52 degrees Celsius in a day,
Yeah.
right? But we haven't had rain for a year. When my European and Australian friends come here at this time of year, they cannot tolerate this. This weather's coming for you too, folks.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that once that it arrives all over the world, granted, I live in a desert. This is the most notorious desert in the world. We know
Not
this,
farmable.
right? But it's not farmable. And this is coming for Brazil. With all the deforestation that's happening, I'm not sure that this is not going to happen in our generation. Let's say we have another 50 years on the planet. They're saying that coffee has maybe 20 harvests left. That's in our generation.
There's still going to be coffee.
So I hope you're right.
There's still going to be coffee because many countries cultivate a coffee in an agroforestry environment, especially if you see around Asia, it's all not monoculture, but
Right.
agroforestry. There's still been coffee, but coffee
That's
will become
awesome.
so scarce that the prices becomes unattainable for majority of
Luxury.
the people. That will happen for sure within this lifetime, within my lifetime.
Yep.
Right.
Most people don't believe us when we say things like that. It's absolutely true, folks.
Because once your land are not farmable, like in Brazil, it's mainly a flat land. For other countries, you can say, oh, let's move up the mountain, it's cooler, I can still farm there. Fantastic. But where does Brazil go? Brazil is a flat land. The altitude is what?
Right.
Between 700 to 900. Where are they going to go? They can't go anywhere else. And if the farmlands gets unfarmable, that's it. We will experience a huge loss in coffee supply for the world. Once
your business.
Once demand outstrips
Go on.
supply by a huge margin, it becomes a luxury product.
Say that again.
If the demand outstrips supply by a huge margin, it will become a luxury product.
And we already know that we are in that cycle
Yes.
where demand is significantly outstripping supply.
That's 7% last year.
Right. And demand is continuing to go in the upward direction and supply is continuing to go in the downward direction. Despite what the USDA and all of these people are saying at the time of the recording of the 9th of July, where these reports are coming out and saying this is going to be a record crop. This next 25-26 harvest is a record crop. By whose standard? How the fuck can anybody know at this point of the harvest? You can't.
No, you can't. You can't tell. You can't tell. Even you say there's a record crop, but because we experienced hot weather just months ago, the bean size is going to be smaller. So although you have even with the same number of fruit, but the weight, the yield is lesser because the bean size is
right. So there's more beans but less weight.
Well,
it's going to take more beans to fill up a bag.
Yeah, if there's prolonged weather, that's happening. Yeah.
Right. Tell me, other than climate, what in your mind as a business owner is a barrier to the longevity of coffee?
Say that again.
What's a barrier? So is climate, let me ask it a different way.
Yeah.
In your mind, is climate the only issue that is going to create a problem for the longevity of coffee?
I think it would be a main problem, climate and carbon. Because as we push in a direction to decarbonize, to reduce carbon, there are even laws, EUDR laws for anti-deforestation and reducing carbon. Therefore we are facing all companies, especially the public companies, they need carbon reporting, right? But I'm not a public.
And accountability.
Yeah, and accountability. But I'm already doing this work to report carbon, to track carbon as we move along as a company. So I will need to find ways, after we have this information, find ways how to run the operation with lower carbon.
Right.
With lower carbon.
Okay.
So it's a very intentional, conscious decision that only happen when you acknowledge carbon is a problem. But if you don't acknowledge carbon problem, you're just going through your hunky-dory days, go along as what you've been doing. Once you acknowledge it and once you awaken, then you start taking action. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really great point for us to end this episode, because in the next episode, we're talking about where are the opportunities for reducing carbon in the footprint of businesses and people who participate in the coffee supply chain. So join us in the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.